Hi, my name is Elaine Wherry, and co-founder and CXO of Meebo. And what I want to share to you today is one of the most difficult moments that I had within my time within Meebo, and specifically the recruiting honeypot. Just a little bit about me. Originally grew up on a small goat farm in the middle of Southwest Missouri, involved in 4-H, violin, and somehow all of this led me to Stanford, where I discovered computers. And after graduating, started a company called Meebo with two really good friends, Seth and Sandy. And at Meebo, I ended up initially authoring the JavaScript framework, and then went on to build out the web, the UX, and the product management teams. So again, I'm here today to talk about the recruiting crisis. And specifically, I want to travel back in time to 2010 at Meebo. 2010 was a pivotal year because it was the year where we had our first promise to our investors to generate significant revenue. And so we had this number that we wanted to hit at the end of 2010. And in 2009, we did a good job. We all got together in a room. We huddled. We said, this is where we want to go. Let's figure out quarter by quarter in Q4, what do we need to do? What do we need to do in Q3? What do we need to do in Q2? What do we need to do in Q1? And it all came down to, if we wanted to be able to hit this number, we needed to be able to create new product innovation, which meant we needed new people resources, which meant we needed time to be able to train all of these new people resources, which meant that in Q1, I had to double our web JavaScript team. Now, at this time, our hiring strategy and our talent strategy for JavaScript talent was to hire these incredible jewels of JavaScript. They were truthfully like, we weren't even looking for people who knew prototype or jQuery. We had created our own homegrown JavaScript framework, and we were looking for people that we could hire who could actually help us maintain and build this really performance-oriented JavaScript framework. And if I looked across the entire globe of JavaScript talent, what I was looking for was so particular and so niche to that time that there were probably only like 25 people across the entire globe that would meet my requirements that we hadn't already hired. And the truth is that, like, of those 25, half had probably already been recruited by Google, Facebook, Amazon. Like, I was in trouble. I was also going out on huge limbs to be able to recruit at this point. I was doing crazy things. I went to Boston, I went to Chicago and hosted a JavaScript bingo session, which is a lot more fun than it sounds when it has a little bit of beer with it. I did things where I went to the artificial intelligence midterms at Stanford and wrote handwritten notes to every single engineer who came out of that and said, hey, you should work at Meebo. Like, I was really trying. So in 2010, I'm all gung-ho, like, oh, we can do this, no problem, like, bring it on. And then my problem went from, like, serious to heart-stopping dire. Every single female recruiter on Meebo's team at that point became pregnant within a month of each other. It's crazy. So after they relayed their happy and joyful news, I slunk back to my desk. I was just like, what do I do? But again, I was just like, well, wait a second, just one more challenge, I can do this. And I thought, well, if there was some way, like, I code. If there was some way, maybe I'll just open up my email inbox and I'll look at all of the recruiters who have written to me in the last 5 years or so, and I'll just look and see who's the best, and then I'll write to them, and then I'll hire the recruiters who will help me find the JavaScript people, which will help me be able to generate revenue this year. No problem. But then when I started looking through all of the recruiters, I realized, oh wait, they're trying to, they forget that I'm a founder and the approach is all wrong, and people who are reaching out to me directly were not the people that I wanted to bring onto the team. So then there's just this tiny little nugget of an idea where it's like, well, wait a second, if only I weren't a founder. And so it just kind of stayed there, and it stayed there for a few weeks. And as the winter months crept closer and closer, we kept interviewing more and more recruiters. Finally, around 2 a.m. one night, I happened to have the Pete London domain name for a completely different reason, and I said, heck with it. I am going to basically create this persona named Pete London. It's going to be based upon all of my experiences, and I'm just going to see what happens. So I posted a one-page website, said, hey, get in touch with me. A resume that was basically my personal resume minus my experience with Synaptics because I knew it would be too easy to come back and identify it as me. And then an incredibly simple WordPress blog with just a few JavaScript references in it. And that was it. And I was like, oh, hope, I'm going to go to bed, and tomorrow I'm going to wake up, and my inbox is going to be filled with all of these people trying to recruit Pete London, and my problem will be solved. But that was not the case. So I posted this probably in November or so, and I had a few rules for Pete London, just so you guys don't think I was going wild and crazy. But Pete London sat in the internet ether for 6 weeks with absolutely zero activity. And I was going on doing my own thing, and I was about ready to consider this entire thing a miserable failure, when around the holiday time I thought, oh, I've got a few extra hours. You know what? Just as a fluke, I'm going to put everything here, identical information, I'm just going to put it on LinkedIn, see what happens. And then, bam. Within, I think it was 4 days, I got my first response from Google. Then I heard from Amazon. Then I heard from Facebook. And I heard from external recruiters. And over the course, I kept this up for 2.5 years. And over that time, I heard from 2.5 years later, and the Q2, just so you know, I stopped the analysis midway through Q2 so that that point in the graph is actually higher. But over 2.5 years, I saw, 530 emails from 382 recruiters from 172 organizations. I was offered 7 iPads, 1 Xbox, 1 MacBook Air, 5 $1,000 referral cash incentives, followed by 2 $10,000 referral cash incentives, 8 coffees, 7 phone calls, which really bewildered my husband because he was the one who got the phone call, anyway, and then 6 lunches. But I love data. I was just like, this is a huge opportunity. And even though we never actually hired a recruiter from this experiment, I learned a ton. And I went through every single one of those 530 emails, and I scored them on a 0 to 3 point basis. And it was based upon whether that email contained contained 3 pieces of information, whether it specified anything about the company, whether it specified anything about the role, and whether it was personalized. I knew it wasn't just something that was a template being sent to zillions of people. And so this is just an example. So personalized, JavaScript Ninja, I was incredibly generous with this. I tried to give points as much as possible. And for 2.5 years, this is basically my airplane project. This is what I did when I didn't have Wi-Fi and I was in email and I was trapped. And I went through the emails multiple times just to make sure my scores were somewhat consistent. And so today, what I want to do is I just want to share with you within my 15 minutes, the top 10 tips and tricks that I've learned based upon this honeypot experiment. So, without further, there we go. First thing, going guerrilla. So Pete London sat in the internet ether for 6 weeks, no activity. And you might say, you know what? Perhaps Pete just was really hard to find online. Maybe it's just that he didn't have very good SEO. I don't know. But the truth is that during that time, there were 10,000 spammers who wrote to Pete via his WordPress blog offering Viagra, offering casinos, like everything, right? Timeshares. Not one of them was a recruiter. At the same time, when you look, you can see this. When you look at the amount of email that comes in, even though Pete London's email was front and center on both LinkedIn and also on his website, the vast majority of the traffic came in via LinkedIn. Now, why this surprised me is because at Meibo, that wasn't how we found our initial engineering talent. If you look at this, we had found, up through about 2010, we had found 1 engineer starting cold via LinkedIn. That was it. And that's like 1 out of 20 something, right? The vast majority of them came from guerrilla recruiting. What is guerrilla recruiting? This is the list that I had around like 2011 with the things that I was going to try. These were just out-of-the-box things that I would try in order to be able to generate talent. I'm happy to share this list with people if you want to email me afterwards, not a problem. But they're just things outside of LinkedIn to be able to network, to be able to find new talent, and to hire great people. Lesson number 2. So prior to 2010, I allotted so much time to recruiting each week on a Friday afternoon. I would sit down, I would say, okay, I'm gonna go find great JavaScript talent. And whenever I pen my emails, I would think, okay, I'm competing with Amazon and Facebook and these gigantic companies. What I need to do is I need to emphasize this amazing, unique startup experience and how they're going to have so much freedom and how this is the absolute perfect place for them to come and work. But what I didn't realize is that when you look at the amount of traffic coming in to Pete London, 85% of it came from other startups. Only 15% came from those large organizations that were in front of mind for me. And that was, those top companies represented I think it was the top 12 companies like Netflix, Amazon, Facebook, Google, but the vast majority of them came from these other, basically my neighbors. And when you looked at the emails, they were all saying the exact same thing. What I thought was unique, which is, hey, we're a bright, wonderful culture startup, come join us. Everybody down the street was saying the exact same thing. I needed to find a way to really differentiate myself and make sure that I could stand out not from the Amazons and the Facebooks and the Googles, but from all of the other startups around the web. Lesson number 3, does it work? All right, so you're getting off the ground, you're incredibly resource starved, you're trying to figure out how you're gonna find your first engineers, and so inevitably, within a startup context, you have to hire external recruiters. And there's always kind of this question in the back of your mind, it hasn't made sense to actually hire a recruiting team. Is it working? Like, when I'm hiring and contracting with these external folks, is this effective? And if you look at the data between internal and external recruiters, the answer is yes. Yes, if you look at it and you just separate out the external recruiters for large established companies and small companies, it turns out that the external recruiters for small startups actually do a pretty good job. So you can kind of rest assured, you're like, I can fall asleep knowing that my external recruiters are, they're staying competitive out there until I can hire a recruiting team. However, this gets to lesson number 4, which is to be very, very careful. So back in 2005, 2006, Meibo, we used tons and tons of external recruiters to be able to hire our initial engineering team. We're just like, the more help we can get, the better. And when I started the Pete London project in 2010 or so, one of the things that surprised me was that all of the contingency recruiters who reach out to us first were all people that we had contracted with earlier. And so when you invite those external recruiters into your organization, I was sharing with them our org charts, I was sharing with them all of the details about our company, and I don't think anybody was being evil, but I definitely feel like our company had been front of mind, and that now they knew specifically what expertise we had in-house, and when they went to another company to recruit, we were right there. And one of the examples that hit incredibly close to home was from this recruiter. So May 13th, 2:20 p.m. Pay attention to that timestamp. This is just a normal recruiting email going out to Pete London, 2:20 p.m. Then what was amazing is that this is an external recruiter that we had worked with. 15 minutes later, instead of writing to Pete, it's writing to me. So now this external recruiter that we had worked with previously is pulling me at both ends. Literally saying, hey, Pete, come out of Meebo, and then saying to the engineering manager, hey, let me help you find great talent. So it's one of those things where I was definitely, it was really hard to nail down any true grievances, but whenever you are working with those external recruiters, make sure that you have the no poach clearly specified within the contract, and then just beware that be very, very specific and about which external recruiters that you want to work with. All right, lesson number 5, time for hoodies. So this graph should speak for itself, but starting from 2010 all the way up to 2012, the amount of recruiting activity for San Francisco increased about tenfold. So regardless of where you are right now, whether you're starting and trying to figure out where your location is, or if you're an established company, it's very clear that you have to have your San Francisco strategy figured out. That's it. So the next part is dedicated to, I think every single person who has been leading an engineering team has to figure out how to basically be a recruiting manager at the same time. It's just, that is a huge part of your role. So what pieces of advice can you give your recruiting team to make sure that they are competitive? And so when you are working with either your in-house or your external recruiters, you have this notion that because they are a recruiter, they should be your cavalry. They should be the people who come in and save the day and allow you to go back and spend your time doing engineering and other parts of your role. If you look at it, the managers are within the top 40th percentile of all of the recruiting activity that Pete Linden saw. So just starting off the gate, you are, without a doubt, going to be recruiting people better than the in-house or the external recruiters that you're probably working with. So. And to be able to, if you want to be able to have a recruiter be able to do better than you, it turns out that the manager overall scores on a scale of 0 to 3 about like 1.7. And so if you want to have a recruiter do better, all you have to do is make sure that they include 2 out of the 3 pieces of information, and they are relieving you and doing a better job than you probably would have done. And then when you're working with recruiters, start on the right foot. If you look at all of the emails that came in, 63% of them all looked nearly identical. My email box was just filled with basically, I was impressed with your profile, sorry for the email, but, and hi, my name is. To be able to stand out, you want to be in that 36% other. So what does an other look like? Other looks like, Pete, I'm reaching out to you given your strong front-end development experience, particularly with JavaScript. Your unique mix of front-end and back-end knowledge experience really caught the attention of our current developer manager, so basically trying to put the personalization up front. And then, if you're feeling incredibly lazy, one way you could easily be able to probably make your email better is if you look at this. These are 3 examples of emails. If you just take out, after your recruiter has written that first draft, take out the first sentence. That's it. It's usually much, much better. All right. Almost done. Follow up, don't spam. So most of the emails directed to Pete came from an organization or came from a recruiter that he had heard from previously. However, if you look at the number of people who said, hey Pete, I'm following up, or this is my second time reaching out to you, it was much, much smaller. It was just 12%. However, if you think about why that is so important, whenever you start your email with, hi, I'm reaching out to you, I know that my previous coworker has reached out to you earlier, you maintain the conversation and the history. And then, just based upon who we are as people, the longer the history you have with a person, the stronger the relationship that you perceive. So when you reach out to somebody, or to Pete, and you say, hey, I wanted to see if you would be interested in this role, and then you reach out to them again, hey, I wanted to see if you would be interested in this new role, I'm really impressed with you, it implies that actually you weren't so impressive that I didn't remember you the first time that I reached out. And so that ignored history implies that the candidate isn't really worth their time, and the outreach becomes less sincere, and then it becomes read as spam. Within all of the emails from the 300 and something recruiters, there were 5 that really stood out. And even beyond just getting a 3 or whatever it was on the scoring, there were 5 that were just amazing. And it took me a while, but I went through those emails and I said, what is it about these emails that are just so impactful? And it was all based upon the use of the second person. And instead of saying, hi, I am a recruiter, we have some great positions over here, call me, it was all based upon second person language, which is, from what I understand, you're a JavaScript expert. This would take you more in the direction of new media content, and I would love to learn more about you and your interests. So then, finally, I want to leave it with this, which is, as much as I hope that I've given you a few bits of a few interesting tidbits to take away from today, I would leave with, do not do what I did. And the reason I got stuck was because I was trying to find these jewels that were incredibly rare. And if I had to do it all over again, the way that we ultimately got out of this hiring crunch was not through Pete London, but it was from realizing that instead of hiring individual contributors, I really needed to be hiring more managers, and specifically managers who could help me recruit and who had networks and knew different ways to reach out to people than I did. Then whenever you're looking at hiring, it really is just like another engineering problem where you break down each piece of the process and you say, where are we losing people within our funnel? And generally, your recruiter should be getting about a 12 to 20% response rate. That's just a good kind of rule of thumb to be able to double check. So I have taken up my 15, 20 minutes. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to me via email. Thank you.